Hello my little learners, you can call me Lovegood, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Here are just a few things before we get started. Today I'm presenting you with Chapter 16 of Ghostly Bonds, titled Kitchen Fork by Jack Conte, by KittyKqt on AO3. But anyways, thank you for tuning in to listen to me, but that's enough of my rambles and jambles, and let's get right into the fic. This is the summary. Summary. Aftermath of Camino. Something was wrong. He knew the second he stopped falling that something had changed. It was cold. Too cold. He forced himself to open his eyes, looking around the sterile room of the UA's nurse's office. He stared at the ceiling until something settled on his chest. He couldn't breathe. He opened his mouth, sucking in a breath, coughing as it caught in his throat. His entire body screamed with more pain than Kachan or anyone had ever given him as he bit his lip, trying not to move. But he coughed again, the air not sucking in properly as he grabbed his stomach, screaming in pain. The door slammed open and Izuku couldn't focus on who it was as he scratched at his body. His chest itched and his head hurt. He couldn't see anymore. There was so much red. He felt something in his arm, but didn't pay any mind as the pain coursed through him, his vision going white. His eyelids dropped and his hands stalled as he tried to rip something out of his chest. The familiar pins and needles feeling of going through an object came back with relief and he sighed, relaxing as the pain stopped. He opened his eyes, trying to correct his position as the tingling feeling disappeared suddenly. He was thrown from where he was, hitting the floor, sending pain shooting through his spine. The next second it was back, and he bit his lips, fighting to keep it there.
"Well, dearie, that is a nasty quirk malfunction," Recovery Girl said, looking right at him.
He looked down, but nothing had changed, as he was propped just over the floor. "You can see me?" She tipped her head to the side, her brows furrowing. He tried again, pressing his hands to her throat instead. "You can see me?" She threw her hands over her ears, pressing down hard until he had pulled his hand from his throat.
"Dearie, I'm old, not deaf," she screamed, shaking her head. "Though I might be after that screech."
Screech? Izuku went to try again, but she threw her hands up, shaking her head.
"Your form is shaky enough. Please don't attempt to put any stress on it."
Izuku's head was swimming with questions that he couldn't even ask as his hands twitched. His vision was growing spotty, and he slowly tried to pull his energy back, smacking into the floor below. "Nezu?" he mouthed, hoping she could understand. She nodded, turning around and messing with something.
"Currently wiping all images of you that the media might have been able to get."
She turned around, a vial of pills in her hand, water in the other.
"You do not want your existence to be known, correct?"
Izuku nodded slowly, reaching his hand out. She set the vial in his hands, but it phased through at the second, and he coughed.
"Do you recall what happened before you ended up on the field?"
She picked up the pills, groaning as her back popped. Izuku hesitated as she set the glass away from him, messing with something else. He nodded finally, and she smiled sweetly.
"Please don't be concerned, child. We will have you feeling all right soon."
Izuku nodded, jumping as the door opened again, the tingling returning.
"Oh, dearie, where did you go?"
Izuku looked down, trying to push his energy out, but he pushed too much out. A wave of light radiated off him and he screamed, everything being thrown back.
"You were not meant to copy his quirk, Ghost,"
Nezu said, picking himself up and wiping himself down from where he had fallen. Izuku's head spun, his vision shifting as he opened his mouth to apologize before Recovery Girl forced herself to her feet.
"You better not speak. I can't even see you and I know you're going to try."
Izuku flushed, nodding as he picked himself off the floor by a few inches.
"Look at the mess you have created for us," Nezu hissed, shaking his head. "The media is all over this mysterious orb at the battle, and the conspiracy theorists are eating it up."
He paused, laughing slightly as he shook his head.
"Even Class 1A is not immune to it. Todoroki has spun quite a tale."
He paused, his ears twitching as he looked around before finally setting on Izuku.
"Ah, I see you have calmed down a bit more. Are you feeling up to following me to my office?"
Recovery Girl hit him on the head with her cane, huffing.
"He's in no condition to leave. Your little experiments can wait."
Izuku shook his head, motioning to the door, getting another huff.
"Fine, No more use of your quirk, for anything. We don't know what you copied or didn't.
Izuku nodded, slowly following Nezu out of the room. It was a slow process, as he went from floating above the floor to suddenly standing on it to being in it. He was tired by the time they reached the office, the room spinning around him. Luckily, they hadn't run into any of the students. He wasn't even sure what they would see.
You copied his quirk, didn't you? The leader?
Nezu asked, though Izuku guessed he already knew as he shut the door behind them. Izuku nodded slightly, biting his cheek.
You should have checked with me, Ghost. That could have killed everyone around with how many quirks you just copied.
Izuku wanted to tell him it was his fault. If he had just let Izuku make a bond, he could have gotten to him faster, or any of his other plans. He shouldn't blame Izuku for it. Instead, Izuku just nodded again, looking around the room.
Was that a Ouija board? I hear you humans find it quite entertaining to use with ghosts.
Nezu walked over to the intricate display of candles and a board set up on the floor.
I assume this will help with your energy output?
Izuku laughed, grateful that no sound came out without him using Present Mike's quirk. He nodded anyway, making his way over. He hesitated before touching the planchette and moving it over a letter. Why? When he didn't move it anywhere else, Nezu nodded slightly.
Why what?
B-O-N-D.
Ah.
Nezu clapped his hands together, his whiskers twitching. He wasn't smiling though.
Your lovely little bonds. Well, maybe having my quirk would have helped you before making that decision. However, it's a personal thing. I would prefer someone not teleporting to me without my knowledge.
Izuku waited for him to say more, but he just crossed his legs, smiling. But was that worth it for putting people in danger? Personal life? Nezu was smart. Izuku knew he shouldn't question him. But even the League had more than this. M-A-N, he finally spelled out, when he knew he wasn't going to get anything else. There was no point. Nezu nodded, tapping his paws together as he grinned.
All for one. All Might's rival. I'm quite impressed you haven't vanished completely. Most of his quirks are still unknown, so it is really a wonderful thing that you have them now. Is your quirk still working?
Izuku shook his head, dragging it over to the no. It wasn't working. He could use quirks, somewhat, but as far as his bonds went, he didn't know. He hadn't pulled them up, and he didn't want to try for fear of messing everything up again. A knock on the door made him jump, and he frowned, looking towards it as he fell through the floor and back out with a gasp.
Toshinori! Come in! Come in!
Nezu was standing by the door, holding it open as All Might stepped in with his small form. Behind him was Kaminari from Class 1A, trying to peek around him. Izuku wasn't sure what they could see, so he raised a hand in greeting, trying to smile at him. Oh my god, you're terrifying! Kaminari pushed around All Might, bounding up to Izuku with a wide smile. Izuku didn't know what to say, just nodding slightly as he looked for Nezu, who was in conversation with All Might. Dude, are you really dead? I mean, I saw you at Kamino, but not like this. This is freaky. Izuku just nodded, the excitable boy sparking with electricity. Young Kaminari, please calm down. All Might called over, and Kaminari frowned, taking in deep breaths. As he did so, lines of lightning appeared around him before attaching themselves to his skin and fading into him. Now it was Izuku's turn to fanboy, spinning around him as fast as he could manage, watching the way his hair stood on end. He motioned his arm up, hoping the boy would catch on. Oh! He raised his arms, and Izuku looked over him, grinning at the way his veins were alight. Cool, huh? It was faint, but there was an unsteadiness to the lines. They seemed to flicker just slightly, as if readjusting. He had the power to him, but it shifted in the air, unknown to those who couldn't feel it the same way he could. He looked over to All Might, the pieces clicking, as he could almost see the same power, just thinner. Lines stretched between the two, much like how his mom's quirk looked in use. He moved over to All Might, moving to touch him, just to confirm his suspicions when Nezu cleared his throat. Izuku stopped in mid-air, his hands about to graze All Might's arm.
It might not be wise for you to touch him in your current state. We don't know how many quirks you can hold.
Izuku pulled his hand back, glaring at All Might. He coughed, looking around the room, his eyes catching on the seance circle. Can he not speak? All Might asked, as if he wasn't standing right there, or floating, whatever. Izuku threw his arms up, moving back to the board. He could feel the three people shift around the table to look at it while still giving him space as he painstakingly moved the planchette. Quirk. He paused, hoping they'd catch the indication of a new word. Transfer. He paused again, pulling his hand off the planchette to point at All Might, then at Kaminari. Nezu laughed, his tea spilling slightly as he set it down. Splendid observation, Ghost. That confirmed it. Somehow, Kaminari had All Might's quirk. The shy look the boy wore solidified it, but his quirk was just an energy manipulation quirk. It had nothing to do with power transfer. Someone else could have used a quirk causing this, but why these two? The number one hero and a first-year student? And while All Might's quirk was widely discussed, he had never even thought of something like this. But the lightning was more than All Might's had ever been. It didn't replace Kaminari's quirk, it seemed to. Ghost, Nezu warned, and Izuku looked up from the board. Stop. Izuku frowned, looking around. Glasses and papers were strewn about the room, the windows vibrating as smoke rose from the now extinguished candles. Izuku put his hands to his chest, nodding slightly. I don't suppose you've told him that this cannot get out to the public? All Might still spoke as if Izuku wasn't even in the room, looking over to Nezu instead. A glance over to Kaminari, who shrugged, told him that this was a common thing for him to do. He took the planchette, forcing his energy into his hands and chucking it forward. The flat side of it made contact with All Might's head, and he tumbled over the back of the couch with the force. Izuku's hand shot to his mouth as Nezu paused in response, looking over to Izuku with a sigh. Did I kill him? Izuku mouthed, and Nezu stood up to look over the couch. He looked back, shaking his head, and Izuku sighed in relief. Kaminari burst out laughing, hiding his face in his hands as his laughter echoed in the room, sparks flying. Nezu grinned, clapping his hands together as All Might peeked over the back of the couch, grinning. Kaminari's laughter slowly died down as he wiped at his eyes, giggling slightly. That was powerful, my boy. He directed it to Izuku, and it sent shivers down his spine. He would rather All Might ignore him than call him that. No. He pointed at the board before he pulled his hand back, trying to force himself up as he started to sink through the floor. You good? Kaminari asked with a shaky breath as Izuku flailed to right himself. He finally managed to get himself up, sighing as he steadied. He nodded and looked at Nezu, who sighed. Ghost here decided to copy All for One's quirk. He spoke in his normal tone, but with the look of shock All Might shot him, you'd think he just screamed. As All Might turned his gaze to Izuku, he threw up his arms in defense of the judging gaze. A bright light shot out of his fingertips, and the overhead lights went dark the next second. How many? All Might asked quietly. Unknown, Nezu said, looking over to Izuku. Though the lights were out, the way that Kaminari literally glowed kept the room bright enough to see. Isn't that the big bad you beat, All Might? He asked, looking over to the hero. All Might nodded slightly as he rubbed at his eyes. This is why you wanted to see us, Nezu? Nezu simply nodded, picking up his tea and taking a sip. They're in prison, though. All of them, Kaminari said, and Izuku shot his gaze over to him. He jumped slightly, holding his hands up as Izuku had just done. Izuku struggled. The planchette was no longer where Izuku could reach it to communicate the issue. Why? He asked instead, pushing his fingers to his throat. Kaminari jumped and All Might slammed his hands over his ears, wincing. Nezu sighed, pushing off the couch to retrieve the planchette. He set it on the board, and Izuku shoved it over to the Y. Nezu sat back down, readjusting before picking up his tea. They are villains, Ghost. That is what happens to them. Izuku shook his head, moving the planchette across the board to each letter quickly. Nezu didn't even glance down as the wood scraped against wood before he lost hold of the planchette and tumbled forward. In a quick motion, Nezu somehow managed to grab Kaminari, pulling him across the couch as Izuku tumbled where he had just been. He went through the floor, falling further and further down, unable to find the way up or out. The darkness was closing in. and his lungs were starting to burn as he tried to figure out how to stop his falling. He slammed his eyes shut, forcing his bonds to the surface, and his head started to pound. More than 100 bonds appeared, some motionless, others still moving around. Some were pale, others darker than usual, while others looked normal. He just grabbed one, a pale-looking one, ripping it forward, hoping to stall himself. Someone was sitting on their couch, scrolling through channels as Izuku gasped, struggling to figure out what was happening. The man turned around, but Izuku was already gone, pulling on one of the darker ones. The new room's lights were off. No one around for him to even be bound to. He backed up, his back grazing a vase, dumping it to the ground. It shattered, ashes falling over the floor as someone screamed in another room. At the sound of their scrambling feet, he pulled another rope before they could reach him. He left the newest room without even looking at who he was by, settling into a closet of sorts in the area. He hesitantly touched each rope, an assault of sense hitting his nose each time. He pulled his hand back after a few unfamiliar ones, his eyes catching on something he had yet to see. One was shifting colours slightly, from normal to the pale colour, so faint he wasn't surprised he didn't notice it. He pulled it quickly, holding his breath as he was yanked forward. The cell room was cold, with harsh cement all around, almost sucking out all life. Shigaraki sat on a chair, scratching at his neck aggressively, chains rattling around his wrists. A TV in the corner droned news of the Kamino fight, the sound muted. His eyes never left the screen, his mouth moving slowly as he muttered something repeatedly. Izuku went to speak before pausing, knowing what would happen. He needed to speak to the League, though. They didn't deserve this. He stayed where he was, unworried if Shigaraki would see him, repeating the process of touching every bond. Eraserhead's familiar scent of coffee finally reached him and he sighed, pulling it tight. The class was in session as Eraserhead droned on about something he didn't bother to listen to. Someone screamed and Izuku bolted, phasing through the walls, biting his cheek at the energy he was using. He finally made it to Nezu's office, not as tired as he would have thought. Kaminari and All Might were no longer present, but Nezu was sitting in front of the Ouija board, sipping his tea slowly. His whiskers twitched slightly as a grin crossed his face as he set his tea down. "Have you learned anything with your quirk?" He clapped his hands together, turning to face Izuku. He hesitated slightly before nodding, half floating, half walking over to the setup. He took the planchette, moving it slowly. L-O-V. He stopped, hoping Nezu would understand it and not think he was trying to spell love or something like that. Nezu nodded in understanding. "You wish to speak to them, don't you?" Izuku nodded and Nezu sighed. "Then I suppose we should work on you safely managing these powers." Alrighty, my little learners, that is the end of this chapter. This one is a bit longer than usual, and is it? I think it is. That might just be because of how difficult it was for me to record this one. Nothing to the author. It wasn't the author's fault. It was my fault, because my voice was just, every time I tried to record this, I had at least 3 different recording sessions, because every time I tried to record it, my voice was just giving out on me. It's still giving out on me now, but this one was definitely cutting it close to the deadline that this needs to be out for, so I am very sorry about that. So yeah, we have 6 chapters left, which is insane. I'm definitely a lot slower than other podfickers, and future ones future fics I do in the future, like multi-chapter ones, will probably be out a lot sooner than this one has been, because this one has been every 2 weeks, every month. This one has been very chaotic as I try to adjust adding being a podficker into my daily routine. Well, more weekly routine, but still. So yeah, but hopefully in the future, everything will be a little bit easier, now that I've kind of figured it out, and I'm getting a microphone very soon. So, you know, everything is kind of coming together, which is very cool. This chapter also is very cool. We finally figure out who has one for all. I do remember, and it is in the tag, so if you saw it. Kaminari, which I think is such a cool option. One I definitely haven't seen before, I don't think. Or I haven't read one. I don't think I have. I think this is the first Kaminari having one for all fic I've read, which is really cool. I don't know if we'll get the Bakugo and Izuku reunion thing, because that would be really cool. I can't remember how this fic ends again, so I think this is going to be really cool though. I cannot wait. And one thing I noticed, this isn't really a spoiler because it was in this chapter, but one thing I noticed is I'm assuming the darker bonds, when he went to it, it was ashes, so I'm assuming it's like dead people. All for One took quirks. Like, All for One took quirks from them and now they're dead. So that's really cool. I noticed that. That was really cool. And then the paler ones were like living people, but now they're quirkless, so it's gone pale. Which again is so cool. That's so cool. I love that the author did that. Hi, future editor Lovegood here. I forgot to mention, but I also noticed, like while I was editing, that when he goes to Shigaraki, he is a pale mixed with a coloured one. And I think that might be a mix of where All for One took his original quirk and then the one he gave, which is also really, really cool. And also, Izuku went into 1A, or I'm assuming that's the class Aizawa was teaching. Did Bakugo see him? Because we know he saw him at Kamino. Those are just two things I noticed that I did not add when I was first doing this review, which I thought I should add. So, my little Lunas, this is a little reminder that you might have something you need to check. I hope you all have a fantastic time wherever and whenever you may be. Day, night, dusk, dawn, low tide, high tide, whatever it is for you. You can call me Lovegood, and that was chapter 16, titled Kitchen Fork by Jack Conte by KittyKqt on A3. Again, the link to this fic will be in the pinned comment by me in this video, and tags are in the description as well as warnings. Bye, little Lunas.